So what I'm going to talk about today is called the power of wonder, and it's about ideas. And the reason is that entrepreneurs are idea farmers, right? That's literally what I've always thought of myself. And people have asked before that, we've been very, very blessed career-wise to have a more than one success. I've started tech companies that have been acquired, companies like Priceline that did an IPO. We've made movies in Hollywood. We've done music tours with everybody from Britney Spears to Elton John. We've done a couple of different things that were successful. And somebody started asking me sort of, why is that? And the first thing that popped to my mind is the reason we have some ideas work is because we plant lots of them, right? Just like a farmer. We're constantly planting crops, seeding, watering, and fertilizing. And I mean fertilizing literally in some of these ideas. And seeing what grows out of what you build. And here's the beauty of ideas. The beauty of ideas is that ideas don't care where they came from. A good idea is a good idea. It doesn't care if you are black or white, if you are old or young, if you are male or female, if you are American or Egyptian. A good idea at any moment in your life, every day when you wake up, you got a chance to start again. This might be the day that good idea comes that changes not only your life, but changes the world. And actually, I was very lucky recently, I got a chance to meet the Dalai Lama. And one of the Dalai Lama's quotes really struck me, because sometimes people look at big dreams and they think they're too little. And the Dalai Lama said, if you think you're too small to make a difference, try sleeping at night with a mosquito. And that really kind of struck me, because every day, every idea, and every person has a chance to make a difference. So let's talk about, why do some people continue to have more good ideas than other people? Where do good ideas come from? You know what? I was looking for a picture of an adult, but every single one of them was offensive, and the kid was cute. So putting pictures of people on a toilet are a risky game. A kid on a toilet, how can you be offended by that? Reading the paper, that's a different story. He's reading about the Browns coaching thing, I think. So the question is, where do good ideas come from? And here's the thing. Most people's opinion of innovation and ideas is that it's an accident. I was sitting on the toilet, I was in the shower, I was driving home, and I had this idea. So that's one way to go about it. You can hope that an idea will just pop up one day, and that's what some people do. But the truth is, I've been studying the world's most successful people. Every chance that I get, I do that. And I noticed something. Ideas aren't an accident. There's things they do to basically open their filters, right? And to fertilize their mind in a way that more ideas flow through it. That's what we're going to talk about today. And your odds of finding the next good idea. When somebody said to me once, you've had a bunch of companies in a row, so you must have had a bunch of ideas in a row. Well, that's true. We were doing something constantly that we're going to talk about now that I think increased our odds of having good ideas. Now, keep in mind that when we talk about innovation and ideas are only half the battle. Because if you think about it, when you're sitting on the couch with your friends on a weekend, everybody has an idea. What entrepreneurs are they're the farmers that take the idea, plant it, weed it, harvest it, grow it. Entrepreneurs are the people that do something with ideas. I saw a sign recently that said, ideas are welcome, but execution is worshipped. And I grabbed my phone and tweeted that sign to everybody, right? Took that picture, because entrepreneurs are the people that take their idea and build something out of them. And I think that's what we've been doing our whole lives. Because you've all been in a meeting. Let's take a business meeting. You're sitting but waiting for the meeting to start, and everybody's talking, and people have really cool ideas. And this is what used to frustrate me. If you don't know what that thing is, it's a bug zapper. Because that's the mental image I have. Ideas are flying all around the room, and then the boss comes in and says, let's get started. And zzz, all the ideas went into the bug zapper, and they're gone. Nobody ever does anything afterwards. So I just want to say that, because ideas are half the battle. But let's talk about that, what it takes to generate ideas. So our thing is the power of wonder. And I'm going to tell you a story of something that happened to me that really, really sort of opened my mind to the way that I'm thinking about it. But I did notice this, that it's about childlike wonder, right? I noticed that the world's most creative, innovative, and successful people have never lost a sense of childlike wonder. And it's funny, because sometimes when people want to insult me, they say to me, why don't you grow up already? And I actually think, if that ever happens, it's over for me, right? I hope I never grow up. I hope I always have that sense of childlike wonder, because that's what I think is the difference between opening yourself to all kinds of ideas that everybody else misses. So If you're not familiar with that, it's one of the world's most terrifying creatures. That's a 5-year-old, okay? I had one day a 5-year-old in my charge, okay? So I realized I forgot something at the office. And I said, hey, get in the car, I gotta run to the office, okay? So we start walking to the garage. And as we're walking, she's looking down, and she says to me, how do they make carpet? All right? And I said, I don't know, there's like machines that weave it together or something. And she's like, you don't know, do you? And I said, I have no reason to know how they make carpet. I don't make carpet. Get in the car. Okay? And she shook her head in disgust. We kept walking. She goes in the garage. She goes up to the car, and she taps on the window. And she goes, how do they make glass? And I said, I don't make glass. I don't know how they make it. And she said, you went to college. I said, I didn't take glass in college. And she said, well, how do they make glass? And I said, well, I remembered going on the glass blowing tour in 8th grade. There's like flame and sand and everything. And she's like, flame and sand? And I said, now I'm arguing to win an argument with a 5-year-old. I said, yes, that's how they make glass, with flame and sand. And she rolls her eyes like, well, college was a waste of money. And I said, get in the car, okay? So you see the strip between the front and the back window? She goes up and she taps on that strip. And she goes, what is this thing called? And I said, it doesn't have a name. And she said, what is that little strip between the two windows called? I said, it doesn't have a name. And she looked at me once again in disgust and said, if it doesn't have a name, how do they order more of those on the assembly line? All right? So it's 5-year-old 3, Jeff nothing. Right? We get in the car and we go to the office. And I'm feeling really bad because I'm getting owned by a 5-year-old. We get to the office, and as we're walking in, we're walking through the office. And the 5-year-old does what 5-year-olds do. 5-year-olds ask questions about everything, and they're never satisfied till they get to the bottom of it. So the 5-year-old walks by and says, what are those machines, and why do you have 2 of those? What does that guy do? Why is she on the phone all day? Why are you printing all these sheets of paper? And I was like, oh my God, get some Cheetos or something and go in the conference room. So she goes in the conference room, and I go to my office, and I sit down, and I'm irritated. But you know what? Here's what I'm really irritated about. I'm not irritated that she asked me all those questions. I'm irritated that I can't answer any of them. So I get up and I go back out, and I see those 2 machines. And she said, what are those, and why do you have 2 of them? So I call my office manager over, and I said, can I ask you something? What are those? Why do we have 2 of them? And she goes, geez, I don't know. Okay? So I said, well, could you find out? So she walks around. She comes back and says, no one in the office knows what they are. I said, how can no one know what these 2 machines are? So my CFO comes out, and he said, I'll get to the bottom of this. And he goes away, and he comes to my office, and he goes, hey, boss, it's worse. And I said, how could it be worse? And he goes, we're leasing those. Okay? So here is the thing. As we walked around, the printout that she pointed at, I started asking people, why do we print that thing? And one person said, well, when I was hired, that's what I was trained to do. That's what I do. I sent it to customers. I called a customer. You get this report? Yes. Why? Because you keep sending it. I said, what do you do with it? He said, on warm days, I prop the door open. So I was like, why do we do this? Jeff, we've always done this. That's just how it works around here. So here is the thing that I realized, that in our lives, we stop seeing all the things because our environment is too familiar. You know what I did on Friday? I told everybody to come into the office, and we're all going to be 5-year-olds. I said, I want you to walk around the office and question everything, because I never saw those machines anymore. The world, the bubble you live in, you walk past the same stuff every day, and you don't see it anymore. So you know what? You stop questioning things, and you stop wondering about the world around you because it's all too familiar. If you're ever driving on a route, the speaker earlier that said you are suddenly at work and you don't remember driving there. That's exactly the problem. If you're ever looking around a little bit, you might see something that you've passed a million times and never knew it was there before because you just do what you do every single day. So when we had 5-year-old day and had everybody come to work and think like a 5-year-old, we completely redesigned our business. We started questioning everything. Well, why do you do that? Why do they ask for that? Why this? And when we were done, our whole business was streamlined, and we had 2 brand new product ideas just because we made it a point to wonder intentionally. So now I do that regularly. We have Wonder Day. Everybody come in and stop what you're doing and look around and wonder about everything. And if we can't justify it, we stop doing it. And if we find a new idea because we had never wondered about it before, we try to implement it. That is a really, really sort of powerful thing that we've lost. We just don't wonder anymore because we just do the same thing every day. So I'm going to challenge you to play the 5-year-old game. Go through your life and ask a million questions until you get a good answer, or you get a better idea, or you can't answer it and you realize you're just wasting a chunk of your life right there that you don't even know why you're doing it. You're just so much stuck in that groove. So here's what sort of stemmed out of that. When we started wondering about it, we got this idea that maybe we should take that a step further. If you work in the healthcare business, as an example, what do you do all day? Healthcare. What problems do you solve all day? Healthcare. What magazines do you read? Healthcare. If I said to you, hey, I'm going to the banking conference, who wants to go? You would say, not me, I work in healthcare. We stay in our lane, in our bubble, and that's all we think about all day. So I'm going to tell you a technique that I use because I started to notice that the people I admired most, who've been most successful, take a broader look at the world around them and then bring it back to them. They don't just look at healthcare. So here's what I mean by that. I call this, for lack of anything else, infosponging. So I'm going to tell you something I do every morning. The first 15 minutes of a day, if you can't do this 15 minutes a day, do it once a week. For the first few minutes of every day, I pretend that I leave my business. I don't work for this company and I don't work for healthcare. You're not at your company and you're not in your business. You know what I do during those 15 minutes of infosponging? I go and learn something that I have no idea why I'm learning. I study something, I read an article I never would have read before. I go out and absorb some knowledge from the world around me that at that moment I don't know why I'm doing that. But here's what else I do. Whatever I learn from it, I write down. I just make little bullet points, and at the end of each of those times, I look at those bullet points of things going on in the world. So, for example, studying a customer service solution that another industry implemented, studying legislation, studying consumer trends. Twice a day, I go to the homepage of Yahoo and look to see what the top 10 trending searches on the internet worldwide are. Why? I don't know. But you know what happens if you do that every single day? You start to get totally in tune with the ebbs and flows of the world around you. What are people thinking about? Because guess what? Those people are your customers. What are they researching? What are they wondering about? What happens when you collect dots is one day you can connect the dots and patterns form. So I pick up these data points. They're like puzzle pieces. And every day, I'm going to give you an example in a sec. I go out and read some articles, research some things out of my domain, make some notes, and I ask myself this. As silly as this question sounds, the world moves really fast. And while you were sleeping, something happened in the world that's created a new opportunity that didn't exist yesterday, and the first person to wake up and jump on it wins. Okay, so why have we had a bunch of successful companies? Because we're constantly scanning the world around us, staring at the dots and trying to connect them to see if something exists in the world that didn't exist the day before. So I literally asked myself that, is there something I could do today that I could not do yesterday? And each time you look at those dots, some days you look at it and go, I got nothing. And the next day you say, I got nothing. And the third day you say, whoa, wait a minute. That thing I read the other day and this fact here, patterns start to form. I'm going to give you a real example. In Infosponging in the upper left, one day I was reading a story about how distribution systems are not 100% efficient and there's always products left over. Okay, specifically, I read a story that said every day 600,000 airline seats fly around the United States empty. So all I wrote down was every day 600,000 airline seats are being hauled around this country empty because distribution systems aren't 100% efficient. At that moment in time, that meant nothing to my life. That was my info sponge for the day. In the lower left, one day I clicked on a story. Just follow your imagination. Whatever appeals to you, click on it. Don't think and don't edit. Let your mind wander because it's actually taking you somewhere. It's actually smarter than you give it credit for. One day I clicked on a story about perishable commodities. The story was about how to sell fruit. I was not planning to open a fruit stand. So you know what you would say? You'd say, this has nothing to do with my job or healthcare. I'm not going to read it. But read it anyway. Because here's what happened. This story was about how you have to sell perishable commodities differently. The story was about selling fruit, right? I had no intention of selling fruit, but here's my thought that I wrote down. A banana? I got 5 days to sell a banana before it spoils. An airplane seat? That's the most perishable commodity there is. The second you close the door to the plane, all the goods are spoiled. So I made a note. So you can already see where this is going. One day I read a story about dynamic pricing and the fact that the pricing is confusing. You call the airline 3 times in a row, you get 3 prices. The point is, what we do is we take all these data points, puzzle pieces. We take a few minutes every day to put them all on the table and look, move them all around, and 99 days in a row, you got nothing. If the 100th day is your Priceline.com, it's a good thing that you kept absorbing the world around you. This company was a startup like anything else. It was an idea. It was the confluence of 4 or 5 different concepts and then looking at them every day and saying, can we make something out of this? And waking up one day and saying, literally, oh my God, we could make something out of this. Today, this little startup idea that started with a small group of people on a table is now, well, as of the end of the year, Priceline's doing business in 180 countries, and it has a market value of $62 billion. I'm glad that we kept looking at ideas and not discarding them because they seemed irrelevant at the time. That's kind of the process. The important thing when you do that is to try some. I said at the beginning that everybody has ideas, but few people execute. One of the most amazing things I learned when I got out in the world and got to start spending days with, one day I spent the day with Sam Walton and Donald Trump and even Buffett and a lot of different people that were my heroes that I thought were the innovators and the executors and everything. Here's an amazing thing that I learned. They're not, because you look at these people and you think, well, they're all smart. She's smarter than me. He's better than me or whatever. It turns out that the most successful people are not smarter than you. The difference between them and everybody else is they got up and picked up a shovel while everybody else was still talking about their idea, saying, man, this time I'm really going to do this, right? This time I'm really getting off this couch and I'm going to pick up a shovel and start digging. The difference between those successful people is they turned ideas into action by picking up a shovel and starting somewhere. Execution is everything. But what I want you to think about, if you're trying to innovate and create ideas for an existing business, I'm going to give you a little thing to do that I always do now. What most people do is they stare, incremental thinking. They stare at the existing, let's say you already have a company. They stare at the company and they say, I want to grow this company and make it better. So if you've been doing healthcare for 20 years, guess what you create by staring at your current company? Healthcare 21.0. And guess what that has? All the inefficiencies and all the bad decisions of the past. So you take this giant thing and you shove it slightly forward. Here's an exercise that I like to make my team do all the time. I say, for the sake of this intellectual exercise, exponential thinking, pretend your company did not exist, and this was day one, and redesign your company from scratch today. No gravity, no rules. Just say, if I was starting over today, how would I build this company? Because you know what? You'll incorporate all these ideas that you already mentally discarded when you were looking at the existing business because it's too hard or they don't fit. You typically can't restart your company completely from scratch with all these new ideas today, but if you take this thing and bring it back down to reality, you're way ahead of the people that look at existing industries and say, how do I make it better? So you can guess that even in a company like Priceline, we didn't look at the existing infrastructure and said, how do we slightly improve the travel agent or travel buying process? We went to the other end and said, what's the coolest thing we could do if you were just doing it from the beginning? And the answer was, well, I'd walk up to a plane and say, that seat's empty. I'll give you $50 for it. All right? You couldn't do that if you were just looking at the current airline system. Everyone said you can't do that. So we started at the other end. And what would we do if we, in a perfect world, if we could design anything we wanted without gravity? This is what we designed. And guess what? Where we started and where we ended up, we're somewhere way ahead of what the existing distribution system did. So do it incrementally. That's the way to think about it. And the last part I want to tell you is you can't innovate in your office. Okay, I was doing this TV interview with these CEOs, and the reporter said, what's the first thing you guys do as business leaders when you hear a good idea? And the other three guys said, I get my team and go in the conference room. And I said, I get my car keys. And they're like, you get your car keys? And I said, yes, because who cares what I think? And who cares what anybody in my company thinks? The only people that matter are the people, the customer at the end of the value chain. So you know where we figured, when I told people early on, what are you working on? They said, I explained Priceline to people, and people actually said, that's the stupidest idea I've ever heard of. You know why? Because none of my friends would ever use it. It wasn't for them. Our customer was in Kmart waiting for the blue light special to smash old ladies with a cart and save 69 cents. So you know where we innovated? We took our ideas, we went to Kmart, talked to people in person, and said, how do you travel? What would you do? How early would you get up? Would you connect here? Get out of your office, get into the marketplace, and that is the only place to validate ideas. Never listen. You're never as smart as you think you are. So, the worst thing that happens to entrepreneurs is success, because they see themselves on TV, and they say, I must be smart. I'm the guy on TV. That is the kiss of death. The smart people realize it was never you, it was your team, and it was your ability to let the customer design your business, not you. So get out of your office with your ideas. With that, I know I'm the last thing standing between you guys and a party, so I will quit here. Thank you guys very much for having me.